Hi, my name is Mariana Arroyo, and today I will be talking about fluoxetine, or you might know it as Prozac, and its journey through the body. So first, let's start with an introduction. Fluoxetine is commonly used to treat psychological disorders such as major depressive disorder, bulimia nervosa, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and panic disorder. It is also known by its scientific name, although it is rarely used in a day-to-day basis, kind of talking about the drug and stuff, so it's mostly used in laboratory setting. Fluoxetine falls under the classification of psychotherapeutic drugs. This means that they have a specific clinical purpose. Psychotherapeutic drugs include antidepressants, antipsychotics, and mood stabilizers. Antidepressants are designed to reverse the symptoms of clinical depression. What's important about these is that they do not produce euphoria or mimic the effects of stimulants on the central nervous system. This is important because it prevents the drug from becoming an abusive drug, like, for example, psychostimulants that get abused because of their euphoric effect. The metabolism of the drug. So after it is first ingested, it seems that fluoxetine is well absorbed, usually after oral intake. It is highly protein bound and has a large volume of distribution. This is partly due to its elimination half-life of 1 to 4 days after short-term administration and 4 to 7 days after long-term administration. Afterwards, it is metabolized to its active metabolite neurofluoxetine, which has an elimination half-life of 4 to 16 days, which is significantly longer than the parent compound. Lastly, 2 to 4 weeks later, a steady-state plasma concentration of fluoxetine and neurofluoxetine is achieved. It is important to keep in mind that although fluoxetine has limited effect on other neurotransmitters, it can interact with other drugs because of synergistic pharmacodynamic effects and its effects on the bioavailability of these other compounds. Now, the long metabolism of the drug is what contributes to its not long-lasting, but long-taking effects. It takes a while for the drug to take its effect, and this is going to be important also to why the drug isn't abused like other drugs. Mostly because when a drug that's abused is taken, a fast action needs to happen in order for that drug to gain popularity in the illegal realm of drug abuse. So who shouldn't take the medication? This is important because there's a specific population that might not be able to take the drug. And this is important because it contributes to how popular and efficient the drug can be. So fluoxetine is very popular because its contraindications for clinical usage are very limited. So first, it's not recommended for the use during pregnancy because its early exposure during the pregnancy can be associated with increased risk of septal heart defects. Additionally, fluoxetine after the 20th week of pregnancy is associated with pulmonary hypertension of the newborn, and exposure to late pregnancy can correlate with the risk of gestational hypertension and preeclampsia. In addition to these risks, trace amounts of the drug can later be found in breast milk. However, some people are, depending on the case, some people need to take fluoxetine as a treatment, and it might be necessary. For example, those individuals who are predisposed to postpartum depression might have to take a certain antidepressant, and fluoxetine might be that the drug of choice. Besides the pregnancy population, caution should be taken when prescribing fluoxetine to the elderly. The tolerance for elderly use is generally safer than other antidepressants, which is why fluoxetine is generally more popular than its competitors. Additionally, there's a warning for suicidal ideation in those treated with fluoxetine, especially in the 18 to 24 age range. And oftentimes what might seem as depression could really be a depressive episode in bipolar patients. So, prescribing antidepressants to bipolar patients can be very dangerous. This is because it could send them into they could send them directly into a manic episode, increasing the risk of suicidal and impulsive behavior. So prescribing antidepressants immediately might not be a good idea, and it's why therapy is also very important. So after it is ingested, it takes effect in the brain. So fluoxetine is a type of compound called the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And as an SSRI, fluoxetine increases the synaptic concentration of serotonin, thereby facilitating the serotonergic neurotransmission. Another unique thing about fluoxetine is that compared to tricyclic antidepressants, fluoxetine has a minimal effect on noradrenaline and dopamine uptake. The minimal effects that it has on other neurotransmitters makes its side effects very minimal. Receptor binding studies have also shown that fluoxetine is virtually devoid of affinity for a variety of receptors, although this includes some subtypes of serotonin receptors. Now, despite the known effects of fluoxetine on serotonin reuptake, a lot is still uncertain about the drug. For example, more research is yet to be done on the mechanisms of action by which fluoxetine exerts its antidepressive activity, which remains mostly unknown. However, some research has proposed the downregulation in the sensitivity of various neurotransmitters receptors as an explanation, but the data is very conflicting. What I mean about the data being conflicted is that although there is much information out there, there is no true consensus. For example, the role of serotonin in affective illness is based in part on the following pathophysiological changes found in depression. First, decreased brainstem in serotonin and or 5-HIAA, increased plasma tryptophan clearance. Tryptophan is an essential amino acid that serves several important purposes like nitrogen balance in adults and growth in infants. It also creates niacin, which is essential in creating the neurotransmitter serotonin. Third, reduction in tryptophan induces depressive episodes in the depressed. Serotonin uptake sites downregulate, while some class of serotonin receptors upregulate. Neuroendocrine activity is responsive to serotonin stimulation. Many effective antidepressant therapies increase serotonergic activity. So, to date, no unifying theory can account for the observed changes in the serotonin system as either a cause or a consequence of depression. After ingesting fluoxetine and it having been metabolized and done its effects in the brain, we can start to see some behavioral effects. These are mostly the opposite of depressive symptoms. Most notably, these behavioral effects will include a decrease in anhedonia, negative cognitive thoughts, and suicidal ideations. In addition, one will also see an increase in energy, motivation, and mobility. Generally, fluoxetine will take a few weeks to make these behavioral changes obvious. Depressive cognition will take a few more weeks to show changes, from 6 to 8 weeks. This is because physiological change, such as an increase in energy and motivation, must occur first in order to lead to cognitive changes. Due to the effectiveness of the drug in helping with behavioral symptoms of mood disorders, the clinical use of fluoxetine has remained entirely psychotherapeutic. Essentially, it appears that fluoxetine is more effective than placebo in improving signs and symptoms of depression. However, some studies that suggest this involved only a small number of participants, which may be due to the drug being relatively new in its clinical use. Although it is relatively new in its clinical use, it's important to know that fluoxetine is often used with therapy, and it's important to have therapy be paired with an antidepressant because of the weeks that it takes to even show its effect. Additionally, there is research that shows that even though it's more effective than placebo, it doesn't eliminate the symptoms of depression, and it's more effective when it's paired with therapy. So, after the chronic use of depression, tolerability of fluoxetine is generally safer than tricyclic antidepressants, especially for elderly patients. Elderly patients are particularly prone to tolerability to drugs, which is why caution is taken when prescribing these drugs for elderly patients. Fluoxetine has a greater tolerability because it causes fewer anticholinergic effects and cardiac conduction defects, as well as less orthostatic hypotension. Additionally, developing tolerance to fluoxetine has been disputed, with some patients reporting a need for higher dose after long-term fluoxetine therapy. However, some may argue this is due to maturation of the illness. Withdrawal from fluoxetine has been studied, and data indicates several reports of symptoms in association with the discontinuation of the SSRIs, including fluoxetine. The most distinctive symptoms have been dizziness, paresthesia, together with asthenia, nausea, visual disturbances, and headache. Lastly, dependence tendency is an important aspect of a drug. In the case of fluoxetine, it seems that although physical dependence on the drug is unlikely, psychological dependence is possible. And although the mechanisms of this phenomenon is unknown, it is postulated that the drug craving and behavioral factors are involved. Now, the psychological dependence may also be the culprit for its developing of tolerance that has been disputed. And these are my sources.